us for our first official League of Gentlemen Fireside Chat. The idea of chats actually came about earlier this year after a conversation between us founders. Our friend Chris Singh had asked, with everything going on around the country and around the world, were we really doing everything we could to give back to the community? And so I know we often sit down and talk about various different issues we see around the world and stuff like we think we could improve. So we wanted to open up those conversations to a larger audience. In this conversation, it was this conversation that sparked the idea of fireside chats on informational topics that we find interesting. And today, our president, Ethan Turner, will be addressing you guys on the topic of olfactory technology and its future in the world. Ethan enjoys writing poetry, runs Cleat Track at Drake University in Iowa, and is the chairman and CEO of Shake It Incorporated. You can join in on the conversation by commenting below, and Ethan will be answering questions at the end of the talk. And so without further ado, I give you the inaugural fireside chat.
Thank you for the introduction, Emeka. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about something that I care so passionately about. Just wanted to extend out one more time that, as Emeka said before, I will be answering questions. I'll have a Q&A session when I finish. So I'll have that open on the side. If you have questions throughout the talk, just post them in there. And then when I get to that section of the talk, I'll go through that. So the way that I'm going to structure this kind of talk is I'm going to start with presenting just my premise. My premise is going to be why I believe that the future of technology is actually olfactory, so scent coming through the nose. And then I'm going to present my argument as to why. So let's go ahead and start this up. Thank you for being here. And my premise for today, the reason I'm doing this talk is to share with you all why I believe that olfactory technology is going to be the next step. I'm going to start with just a simple metaphor and explaining from there forward what exactly olfactory technology is. So when you come home and you take a deep breath and you sigh. You feel at home. Walk in, you walk up to your wife or a loved one, and you get this certain scent that comforts you. It brings this calmness to you. That is called olfactory memory. That is actually the strongest form of memory that actually exists amongst all of our five senses. When you approach someone, you're actually able to develop through a sense of smell, through our primal kind of attributes, this sense of memory is able to develop. And so that is what olfactory technology kind of steps in. And so let's start by explaining what olfactory technology is and how it comes about. So when we're developing memories, we're able to develop both explicit and implicit memories through olfactory proteins that are found in our nose and in all mammals' noses. And for each protein, there's actually one odorant, which is a physiochemical molecule that's found out in the environment. And it's a 1 protein to 1 molecule ratio that we find in our nose and in our cortex that triggers a distinct scent. So scientists have discovered that there's about 1,000 different scents out there that our nose is able to pick up and mix around and do things with for us to create these distinct scents. Excuse me. So when the bonds are created through coming home or smelling a familiar scent, immediately you're able to trigger through a neuromodulator in your brain this sense of an experience, the sense of a memory. And that is actually instantaneous because the olfactory system in our brain is actually hardwired very quickly to our hippocampus and our amygdala, which are the creators of our memory, our explicit, implicit memory, as well as our very strong emotions. So, but the problem is we live in a society that's very visual and very audio oriented. When you see something, you don't say, oh, I know that, that's that smell. And you point it out and that's how you differentiate between objects. What actually ends up happening, because we're such a visual culture and such an audio culture, we go to the movie theater and we see a movie or we see a person. We're able to distinct based on who we see what something is. And we're also able to say, you know, when mom calls, that's mom's voice. You're not able to distinct that smell because that's just not taught in society. However, if we were to change kind of that mentality about being able to see what's going on and not only just see, but to hear and to smell and to recognize through our olfactory senses, we would actually end up recovering much more of our memory and much more of the things that happen in our lives, the experiences that we have. So that's kind of where I believe the problem with modern tech comes in, is that the brain doesn't actually desire objects or materials. So when you're watching things, the brain isn't desiring for that. People always say that people are materialistic, but they're only materialistic because what in reality happens is the brain desires stimulation. Stimulation can come from many different things. It can come from money, it can come from luxury items, it can come from flowers, it can come from a hug from a loved one. But the mental stimulation that happens is a release of dopamine into the body, which is a sense of reward. And so when this release of dopamine is released, we actually have a natural addiction from birth. When our parents birth us, we get they push out a sense of dopamine, which immediately from then forward allows the human body to have this natural addiction to wanting to be rewarded. And the distinction on what a reward for each individual is changes based on how the person is brought. So the different cultural aspects, such as money in one society and a hug in another, can release different amount of dopamine in a person's system. And so because olfactory senses activate the amygdala and activate the hippocampus, those are some of the primary creators of dopamine in our system, as well as in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which controls physical abilities as well as the creation of decisions. And so if you're able to stimulate this part of the brain much more rapid through smell than through touch and hearing and seeing, you're much more likely to remember an experience when you have a dopamine rush in it. People always say to remember someone, you always feel an emotion. You don't just remember it and then that's empty. So the fastest way to build an emotion, the fastest way to build a memory or an experience is through your nose. So there's plenty of physical gifts. However, stimulation of the brain can be caused by sensory overload. So not just from seeing these gifts or not just from seeing or receiving a hug, but this means things such as watching a video or watching a movie, where you get this visual overload. There's so much going on that your eyes are darting around searching, and it's activating the small spouts of dopamine that happen in our brain. And when you're hearing the audio, you're hearing the boom of thunder in a movie or the explosion that happens, it triggers this dopamine effect that washes dopamine through your system and makes you crave to go see another video, makes you crave to watch another movie. So that's kind of how you can stimulate the brain through just video and through audio, or audio and visual. So to explain kind of how this path has kind of brought us to where we are, we started off with just having photography. The original kind of stimulant for what human beings would base society off is photography. And that is what has kind of led us towards this one-way direction of being able to just make a distinction between objects based on the visual appeal of them. So rather than seeing a pillow and saying, I see that pillow, that's a pillow, or it could have been, if we had come up with an audio technology originally, I hear the sound from that pillow, or I smell that pillow, which is what I'm going to go towards next, is making these scents and being able to familiarize yourself with specific scents so that you can better recall memories and experiences. So after photography, we came up with moving photography, which is just video. We didn't have sound quite yet, but that created a larger stimulation of the visual parts of the brain, releasing just a bit more dopamine. So watching a still image and watching an image that requires you to dart your eyes around actually activates the brain a bit more than just simply watching or looking at a picture. So after we added audio to the video experience, we were able to trigger yet another stimulation to the physical body and to the brain. And what you end up having in this video is an overload of visual and an overload of audio, because you're hearing what's happening, you're hearing what's happening in the movie, you're hearing what's happening around you, and your brain's working constantly to make these distinctions between what it's seeing, what it's hearing, and how it can further engross itself into it. And engrossing itself into it, you're getting even more of a dopamine rush, desiring to see the next part and desiring to see more, and to require more stimulation. So after that, we actually developed things such as video games where you're able to take a controller and control what's happening, which is a sense of touch. And so originally, many controllers didn't have vibration features. And so you were able to control kind of what's going on through viewing it, getting this visual overload, getting this audio overload through the sounds that are coming through the television. And then you're also getting the stimulation where you're having hand-eye coordination, controlling what you're seeing, what you're doing, and what you're hearing, further immersing you. So now you're getting this touch overload that puts you into the video game, puts you into stimulation mode of the dopamine. So adding on to that, what we ended up adding into controllers and into our environment was vibration, and this feeling of being able to feel like you're in it, pulling the trigger of your Xbox controller and feeling like you're pulling the trigger of a gun in Call of Duty. is a sense of stimulation to the brain, which once again will further release more dopamine. So the more that you're adding, you're starting to layer. You're starting with photography where you're only getting visual. Then we move to video where you're getting video and audio. You're getting visual and audio. Then we move to video games where you're getting a touch, and then vibration where you're getting a touch overload. So the only kind of sense that's left out, it seems like, is taste and smell. And I think that based on the research that I've done, that smell, since it's a faster way of forming experiences and a faster way of forming memories, that smell is the next step in this device world that we live in, and being able to get an overload of smell. That's not to say that it hasn't been tried before, actually. There were several other inventions that were made for things such as movie theaters, which is one thing I'll come back to, where there was an odor released into a theater, and people were able to watch, hear, sense, smell, feel the vibrations from the sound, and have this overload of an experience where they really felt like they were enjoying the movie. The problems that came about, though, with it were that the scents that were released based through where the scents were located in the auditorium or in the movie theater, the scents would reach people at different times. So this looking at the spring of Italy and watching and saying, "Oh, I smell the roses," would come to one person a lot faster than it would come to the person in the back of the theater who would get it when the gun scene was happening and the fire was going on, rather than having this overload. They're having a much larger confusion happening. And so that was the first step, I believe, in creating olfactory technology. But the next step is going to be perfecting it and getting it into things such as mobile devices, and moving into particularly its own separate device that can possibly adapt to other forms of technology. One of those forms of technology that I think olfactory technology can really help out is actual virtual reality. We see that the struggle for getting the brain to actually make itself believe that it's in this virtual technology through things like Oculus is nearly impossible, because our brain can't put itself in there, because it's not hearing what's happening. It's not using all of the senses that are required when you are entering into a reality, which would be taste, smell, touch, sight, and to hear. And so if you're not having all five of those senses, you can't fully immerse yourself into what it feels like to be a part of that reality. And so I think adding in some form of olfactory technology to something like virtual reality would further put you into the experience and quicken the rate, because you create implicit experiences through smell. So just walking into a house constantly, you begin to sort of familiarize yourself with certain things like that. So if you're able to get this release of smell from some form of virtual reality technology, you'd be able to slowly acclimate to the environment and how it works in your system. And you'd slowly start to accept this alternative reality, this virtual reality that you're seeing and that you're hearing. So my plan, actually, to kind of conquer this problem of being able to create some form of olfactory technology that puts you deeper into your experiences and makes memories more memorable, actually, is to create some form of a device that goes out and collects these 1,000 different odors or odorants that are collected and paired with the proteins, and to develop a device that not only collects these, but is able to mix and match them so that you're able to get a combination of whatever scent appears in video, or whatever scent appears through audio. You're able to then recognize it by smell. So pairing certain scents with certain visual stimulants and certain audio stimulants will help our brain to start to adapt, and it'll be generations on from here that excuse me, that our grandsons and our children will be able to experience recognizing things through smell. People always say, "Oh, I can smell mama's apple pie" when it's sitting on the window. You always see that in the movie. Well, if you can make that a reality where you're not only just seeing it in the television show, but there's a distinct smell that we often associate with the smell of apple pie, and with the smell of mom, and with the smell of home. If you can create those in an environment where you're having a visual and audio stimulation, you can take that experience to the next level. So there's already actually technology that kind of exists, and I'm going to try and pull it up on this Google Talk Hangout that I'm doing. So give me one moment, and I'll see if I can share my screen with you and show you what's called the Madeline, which was made by Amy Radcliffe, and she created a device that is able to capture the scents that people have, and then produce them, reproduce them, so that people can experience them. So here's the video, and then I'll bring it back to the chat, and then after that, I'm actually going to open it up to a little bit of Q&A. So let's watch this.
Looking in, looking out, summer day in sunshine, cook a stone and watch it rain. Take your time, that is strong. I will hang you like a keychain, like the road for the lonely man.
Okay, so that was the Madeline. I hope you got kind of an idea of what olfactory technology could potentially look like. And that's a great way to kind of move me into my Q&A about how to start developing these forms of technology. I'm looking for help more than anything. I'm familiar with a few things dealing with the brain and how these things are created, but I'd love to just open it up to the community and see what questions people have about olfactory technology, and how it can really be an impact to what we're doing in the world right now. So without further ado, I'll give people some time, and I'll pull up some things and see what questions we have. So let's see, pulling up my phone to get some questions. Going to move over to the YouTube link as well, so give me just a moment, and I'll check the YouTube and see what comments are there for people watching. Sorry, my internet's moving a bit slow because it's streaming as well as it's trying to pull up these questions. taking some time. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Let's see. Okay, there we go. We have a question. Got it up. So the question that I was asked is, how do you plan on gathering all the necessary scents and combinations to effectively create all the scents possible in a movie? For example, it would be very disconcerting to all of a sudden be smelling something and then not the next moment. So one thing that I actually plan to do if I can create this technology is to open it up to the public to go out and gather these senses and send them back to a lab. So creating a device that can create that you can store a scent in, similar to the Madeline, where you were able to put what odor you wanted, stick it in there. It would pull out the smell. You package it and you'd send it. But moving a step further from having to package and send it, I'd like to try and find a way to create an electronical or a less analog way of passing that information along, so that you're able to get a digital reproduction of what that smell should look like, so that you're able to then take that digital reproduction, send it to another system or to another computer, which can then push out the exact same odorant, which would then create a sense of smell. So that's that answer. If that answers your question, that's from Jonathan Osafuye White in Des Moines, Iowa. Yeah, so that's my plan with that. Let's see. Let's head back over to YouTube and see if any other questions were asked. It's taking quite a bit of time to get this up. Well, it's looking like I'm having connection issues, so I can't get to the Q&A section that's on YouTube. But if you want to follow up and send me any questions for this talk that I had, you can actually send them to ethan.turner at glimpse, GLIMPSE.global. And I'll reply back to your email with as promptly as I can and see if I can answer it. Feel free to follow me on Facebook or to add me on Facebook, Ethan M. Turner, or to follow me on Twitter, at EMAJEC at eMagic. So that's the name to follow me on Twitter. If you have questions there, you can move over to that forum. And just feel free to follow. Thank you guys for giving me your time and your attention. I hope that, we have one more question. How do you think society will react to this new technology? To answer your question, this is from Rashawn Rooms in Minnesota. And he is asking, how do I think this technology how society will react? And I believe that society will actually react pretty opposed to it in the beginning. I think when photography came out, the original assumption was that if you were to take a picture of someone else, it was to capture their soul. That was the original interpretation by the Native Americans of what taking a picture of someone meant, or not to aggregate all the Native Americans as well as specific tribes, or a specific tribe that said that. And it was the same thing with video. It's been the same thing with video games. But I think moving forward, it takes a little bit of time to adapt to technology like that. We're still seeing some pushback from things like Google Glass. We're seeing pushback from things like Microsoft HoloLens, which are trying to move into a virtual reality space, or a space where you're creating your own new reality. And I think adding smell to that in the time that we're living in is going to be a bit of a leap for people. But I think over time, technology and kind of science will kind of become a social norm to push that forward. So I think that's a good way to move forward in society, is to kind of see how it can be accepted after that initial release. I have another question that just popped up. How much would a device like this cost, and would it make sense to even spend the money? So to answer that question, how much would it cost? I can't quite say just yet. I haven't started to develop any form of product. Things like the Madeline, I saw online are anywhere between $500 and $1,000 for the original technology. As Moore's law kind of explains, that as technology continues to advance, it tends to get smaller and a lot cheaper. So the initial products would probably be quite expensive, and the worth of it would only be to those that consider themselves, I guess, wanting to be involved in a movement similar to this. So capturing that audience would kind of be the first step in moving forward. After capturing that audience, I'm sure the price would start to reduce, and the value of adding this would be to increase experiences, to increase kind of the richness of memory, the richness of really feeling like you're in a place. If you don't have that desire, then things like virtual reality and things like augmented reality, which would be HoloLens, aren't going to be all that intriguing to you. So the sense of smell being added to those is also a thing that I think would kind of be a drawback to you as well. So the benefit though of having it is, once again, to increase your experiences and to increase your memory. Thank you. Let's see. Let's see if we can get the YouTube thing up. Maybe my internet's starting to move again. Still moving pretty slow. Well, if I can't get this YouTube thing up, I think I'm going to go ahead and actually call it a talk. So I'll give it one more minute to try and load. It's sitting pretty stagnant. Excuse me. Yeah, if it's looking like my YouTube isn't going to load up, I probably should have tried to place another laptop down here. But once again, then I'd just like to thank you all for your time and for lending me your attention for the past 30 minutes to talk about something that I value. There will in the future be more talks similar to this coming from the League of Gentlemen, and I hope that you've enjoyed the ability to get an insight to what we believe in and get an insight to what I believe in. As I said before, you can follow me on Twitter and ask more questions as a follow-up at EMAJEC. That's at eMagic. Be sure to drop a question in there if you really are curious. Thank you once again for your time. Have a nice day.